Good morning, everyone. Just like to thank Conor and Mervyn for giving us the opportunity to speak this morning. And I suppose he's burst my bubble a little bit, because I normally am in the audience for these events and the crowd wouldn't be as big as I have to admit that it is today, so we were very delighted. But I think Mervyn thinks it's the good weather and not the speakers or the topic for today. So I couldn't let you away with that one, Mervyn. So today's topic is very much around the whole area of customer and product profitability. And I suppose to set the scene, Dr. Robert Kaplan was over last year, and what we want to do really is share our experiences over the last few years working with clients and also the learnings from Dr. Kaplan. And one of the books he recommended when he was over that's quite topical and related to this area at the moment is one called Winning in Turbulence. And it's really all about doing more with less resources, which really is a key challenge that we're all facing at the moment. And there's a specific section within the book in typical American fashion called Turbocharge Your Sales Team. And really that takes you through some of the areas that we're going to cover this morning in terms of who are your most profitable customers and products, and also how you can really optimise your sales teams. So the key theme really is for us all to identify where is the company generating the best results, measured by profitability and growth, and which product lines, which markets, which sales channels and which customer segments, and really who are the customers that we love the most. Because I suppose in sales we've always been taught all customers are equal and we really need to be very customer focused. But I suppose one of the things we really want to figure and to go through is, are we customer focused or customer obsessed? And the difference being that if we're overly obsessed with unprofitable customers, it actually can be quite negative for the business. So we need to just focus on the more profitable customers. So the three key questions are: what drives your profitability, what products, what sales channels, what markets, and really to understand that at a net profit level. And I suppose that's really an open question to the floor. Do we all really understand at a net margin level where our profitable customers are? What are your costs to serve a customer? We're always very focused on the acquisition costs, but really if you're in a very competitive business and margins maybe are quite low, the importance of knowing that cost to serve, the ongoing serve costs for those customers. And then the third area is your sales channel teams optimised to deliver peak results. So kicking off with the first point, this is a whalebone graph that is output of a lot of the work that Dr. Kaplan has been doing with customers over the last number of years. And the Pareto rule, 80-20 rule really applies here. That what he has found is that 20% of your customers can really deliver between 150 and 300% of your total profits. Around 70% are breaking even, and the 10% in the red zone here can be losing between 50 and 200% of your profits. So when you think about it from a sales point of view, we spend so much time working with marketing to get the marketing campaigns out there, setting the teams up, delivering on the sales results, and maybe working on long tenders, and really to find out that potentially 10% of that entire customer base could really be losing an awful lot of money. And I suppose the key challenge here is to spend the time, and the time and effort is really worth a while to identify who those customers are. And what we're saying is not that you get rid of those customers, but you're absolutely looking at ways to make them profitable, and that a key strategic programme should be, once you identify who they are, that you're putting in place, whether you're changing the product, you're changing the pricing, or when you have the information that you're going to talk to customers with a very transparent view of how they work with you in an effort to move them into the profitable zone. And also very importantly that the people that are in the green zone, the 20% who are making you an awful lot of profit, that you do whatever you can to keep those and ensure that you have your best teams working with them. So just to highlight, over the years we've always been very focused maybe on revenue-based management or gross margin-based management. You'll see here in the bar chart that the area highlighted in blue represents different customer segments based on a revenue approach. So you'll see there that obviously segment 1 and segment 4 are very, very high revenue based. But when you look from a gross margin point of view, which is shown in the green bar there, you see that it shows a different view of the world. And that's not overly surprising that there's that difference between revenue and gross margin if there's a very high cost of sale. But I suppose the important thing, and the beauty that technology and methodologies have evolved over time, is that you can now get the net profitable view or your net margin view in a very detailed way, in a very timely way. But you can see that really between the gross margin and the net margin, there's some very clear distortion here, particularly if you look at segment 4 there. Like if you were running your business on a gross margin view and driving your marketing campaigns, you would very much be very excited about segment 4, but the reality is that because of a very high cost to serve in that segment, it's actually very unprofitable. So that's really the key thing that we want to go through, is that showing that difference, how a very high cost to serve can really impact on that for you. So just to take you through a case study, we are seeing in terms of this intense view and a forensic view of profitability at the moment, a lot of the very large global companies are really spending a lot of time in this space, particularly if they've high product volumes, where they have quite a number of customers and sales channels. And you have people like Coca-Cola in this example, who now can get their profitability right down at a customer and even a SKU level. So just bear in mind the layer of detail. And that effectively makes the brands a lot more transparent. And when they are running promotions or different activities in different regions, because they can manage on a net profit view, they can really get a really good sense of what is going on. So they, at the end of each month, effectively have very much a fact-based net profit reporting on their 250,000 customers, and also in terms of all their SKU and the SKU combinations. So very, very powerful. And this really is at the heart of how they're driving the sales and marketing part of their business at the moment. And also in terms of that, in driving the promotions, as I was saying, and also by looking at a few percentage points increasing in profitability, and also by looking at their costs, the net result can be a huge increase in their profitability. So they can achieve hundreds of millions in return on investment and cost savings in terms of their profitability. Okay, so moving on to the second point. And really the key question is, what is your cost to serve the customer? So what are all of the costs that you put into the bucket or the cost stack when you are actively serving a customer? And the key thing here is to ensure that the costs to serve the customer always obviously must be lower than the revenue that you're taking in. So this graph now depicts the traditional costing view of the world versus the accurate costing or an activity-based costing view of the world. So if you look on the left-hand side here for traditional costing, we're showing two customers. You have customer A and customer B with two very similar revenue figures and very, very similar gross margin figures. But the key difference being that normally when all of the indirect costs are applied, what a lot of organisations are doing is they're just applying a percentage allocation of their indirect costs. So the selling expenses, the general expenses, the administration expenses, the finance or finance director counterparts will typically, in most organisations, just apply a percentage proportion of those across. So your indirect costs are applied fairly evenly across to all of your customers. And what really we are saying, and based on Dr. Kaplan's research, by missing out on that extra layer of forensic detail, it can really distort what the true profitability of those customers might be. So when you move over to the right-hand side here, showing your accurate costing, when you use a methodology such as activity-based costing, that Joe will talk in further detail, that Board Gosh have embraced, you now get a very forensic view of how all of the indirect costs are applied to those customers. So effectively you're looking at all of the departments that support that customer. So whether it be support, whether it be billing, whether it be credit control, whether it's marketing, whether it's HR. So you're looking right across the business at all the different business units that are involved in supporting those customers, those products. And what you're doing is you're taking a very accurate view of what is the percentage of time and costs that those departments are working on, whether it's different products or different customers. So as you can see from this, when you do it on that most accurate and forensic view, you actually can uncover where there's hidden profits. So that customer A is actually a lot more profitable than you previously thought, and customer B is actually a lot more unprofitable. And the view there, as you can see, is it can give you a very different view of exactly what is going on within the business. So the contributing factors when you don't have that forensic layer of detail about your cost to serve is that there can be really a a breakdown of relationships between customers and suppliers. So I suppose one clear example there, if you're providing an outsourced service into a client and they consistently ask you to provide extra layer of service in the context that it's extra customer service, but the more extra service they require, the more that's increasing your cost to serve. And it's all the time shrinking the margin that's available. And at the end of the day, the relationship between customer and suppliers needs to be a win-win situation. So with this detailed view of the world now, you can actually have very transparent and very open and frank conversations between customers and suppliers. Other areas that can cause difficulty is that if there's really excessive demand for free services or heavily discounted products, that can lead to a lot of challenges. And as we've seen from the whalebone graph, customers that are in that red zone, where they're in that bottom 10% that are really eating into your profits, if you continually over-service those profitable customers, it's effectively due to lack of information, but that is constantly just eating away at your profit margin all the time. And that goes back to what I was saying in terms of, the choice between customer focused and being customer obsessed. And I think the key thing is, as salespeople, as sales managers, as sales directors, if we have this detailed view of our customers, then in our dealings with them, we have huge transparency when it comes to price negotiation, or if they do need extra service, you do know what that margin is. And particularly if you're in a very competitive market where the focus is always about trying to gain market share and trying to gain customers from your competitor, and if it's a very low margin, it's really important to have this information, because you can't be all things to all men. So this is now about picking and choosing which markets and which segments you can now go after, because you have this layer of information. So just to give you a sense of what are the characteristics that make a customer a very high cost to serve, or what makes them very unprofitable. And again, this has been uncovered time and time again, both in the work that we have done in staff balance with clients and also in the findings from Dr. Kaplan. And one of the key things that's found as well is that if you have a very large customer, it's highly unlikely that they're marginally profitable. You'll find that a very large customer is either incredibly profitable or not profitable at all. So some of the characteristics here on the left-hand side, break-even or loss customers tend to order custom products. It tends to be always very customised, very special. They order small order quantities, customised delivery. They always want special treatment. A lot of manual processing behind the scenes, particularly in financial services, where there's a huge regulatory requirement to have an awful lot of paperwork. But if there's a huge amount of time dealing with all of that manual processing, and if a huge amount of your labour cost, your headcount dealing with that manual processing, that really is impacting then on your cost to serve. Very high pre- and post-sale support, and they may pay very slowly, or they may pay with a payment type. We've uncovered that with one client where they had multiple payment types, but one of the payment types that they offered to clients really impacted on their cost to serve. Or another example was within a billing department where there was this very special billing arrangement had been set up for a very high-end customer, a very large revenue customer, but because there was one person full-time dealing with that billing and all the queries associated with it, it really impacted on the cost to serve. So again, when you have this layer of information, you can make changes. The converse of that then really is your highly profitable customers. So they tend to order standard products, they have very high order quantities, so you don't have to keep a lot of stock for them. They have predictable order arrivals, electronic order processing, or the very high amounts of self-serve. So I suppose one very good example of that is if you look at the airline industry over the last number of years, they have really pushed the serving out to the customer. So if you take Ryanair or Aer Lingus, for example, we now go online, we book our flights ourselves, we use our own printers to print the boarding pass, and they still charge us a €10 administration fee for the pleasure of us doing that. But if you look at the total cost that has taken away, it's not just the people cost of someone in the airline side now not having to deal with printing of the boarding passes, etc. But when you add in all the other costs like the paper and the printing and all of that, so they've been incredibly clever at really understanding what their total cost to serve. And very easy, they've made it seem very easy that it's all a convenient thing for the end user to do now. But in reality is they've made their businesses a lot more profitable because of that. And you can also see with a lot of the technology companies now as well, like many of you that use Salesforce, what they do, particularly in terms to minimise their pre- and post-sale support, they're using things like YouTube and videos to do a lot of training videos online. So instead of people needing a lot of hand-holding and pre-sale support or someone to go on site and help them, that they really encourage you to log in and go to a webinar, so you self-train yourself as such. And likewise on the back end, from a post-sale support point of view, that you go online and you put your query in and they answer it, or else there's a knowledge base. So you see how people are really using technology